DNR, local DNR headquarters here in Hayward, and we're talking to one of our favorite biologists, but the only one we got in the area here, Max Wolter, who's been pretty active on getting a lot of things done as far as our fishery, and we've got a good important meeting coming up that we have every year, don't we, Max?
Yep. The Conservation Congress spring hearings will be coming up on April 9th.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
You know, and there's a lot of things, and we just don't normally get enough attendance to that from what we should have, right?
No, I mean, statewide, there's, even in this area alone, there's thousands of people that like hunting and fishing, and we'll typically get only 100 would be pretty good. Typically we get less than 100 people that'll actually take the time to come and weigh in on these important issues that affect all hunters and fishermen.
And a lot of times there's some pretty good ideas come out of the crowd with resolutions that are submitted, and they wind up on the vote for statewide 2 or 3 years later, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is ground up management here. So if you have an idea of how to fix a problem or change something and make it better, you can come and you can submit a resolution, and people do that every year. So people weigh in on that. Like you said, some of them advance and they become an actual rule change.
This year it'll be the winter this year, right?
It's going to be at the Winter High School, 7 p.m., April 9th. So hoping for a lot of people to come and turn out for that.
I know you move it back and forth between Hayward and Winter to give the people from the other end of the county a chance they don't have to drive so far.
Exactly, yeah. Since we have such a large county, we do try and mix up the location.
What are some of the interesting things that are going to be on that this year?
Well, the questions range from statewide to local. Looking at the statewide level on the fish side alone, I'm not even going to talk about hunting. People should check that out. I'm not an expert on the hunting rules, but just looking at fishing, we've got questions related to bass fishing and bass tournaments, whether we want to change seasons for bass, whether we want to create some rules to allow bass tournaments to happen on lakes with special fishing regulations. Then we have local questions like, what should the panfish regulation be on the chippewa flowage? And that's one a lot of people will be very interested in around here.
I know I'm going to do a video here when we're done this one about talking about panfish and what size fish we should keep and what's happened to our panfishing, but that's a critical one when we want to see quality panfishing out there.
Right, yeah, and this is an idea that's been kicked around, for a while. Obviously, the chippewa flowage is a hugely popular fishery. We have a ton of resorts and guides that depend on that for their income. So there's a lot of people that I'm hoping will be really involved in this process and get in on the conversation so that we can get it right. That's what this is all about, is getting enough feedback that we can get it right and we can at least do the thing that the majority of folks would like us to do.
There's some differences on the flowage compared to a lot of waters. One, we've got this drawdown right now. The lake's down probably around 8 feet. That tends to concentrate fish in the winter. And then we never had ice fishing in the winter. Now we've got ice fishing in the winter. So we may have to take a little different approach on management on a lake like that.
Yeah, certainly. There's unique factors in the chippewa flowage. What I tend to tell people is there aren't many situations where a lower panfish bag limit is a bad idea. It tends to improve size anywhere you do it. The question is, do you want to take that step, and do you feel like you need bigger panfish on that particular water body? And the chippewa flowage is one that's sustained a lot of fishing pressure for panfish over the years. There have been some changes, as you've noted, and this is just a proposal that's out there as an option to kind of help manage it.
Well, there's a lot of options that are coming up now. I noticed that talking to one of my guide friends over in Minocqua, a bunch of the lakes over there, like the turtle flammable flowage, have a 10-inch minimum size limit on the crappies. I don't know why that went that way. You'd think they'd want the bigger ones to be protected more so than the small ones.
Yeah, that panfish size limit on the turtle flammable is very unique. It's one of the only minimum length limits for panfish in the state. We tend to avoid using minimum length limits for a number of reasons, particularly with panfish. The reasoning can be kind of complicated and biological, but really we don't want to see a lot of those fish dying before they get to the minimum size limit. We'd rather have anglers get the chance to harvest them. You have to have really good data on how fast the fish are growing in that lake to even know if a minimum length limit is a good idea. So that is one place where it works out, but yeah, I don't see minimum length limits being something for panfish that we use broadly.
The best option is usually reduced bag limit or different bag limits, like what was proposed on that chip.
Right, yeah. Reduced bag limits tend to be a little bit better option for panfish, and just by lowering the amount of fish that are harvested, you're going to get a little bit better size in the long run because those fish are being allowed to stay out in the lake a little longer, get a few more years of growth on them.
So how does that whole process work? We've got the conservation meetings, and say I brought out a resolution at the end of the meeting, and if they want, somebody's got an idea or something, they could come talk to you and come up with how to put in a resolution, right?
Yeah, so proposals can come from a few different places. They can come from the DNR, so I can write one as the fish biologist. They can come from the Natural Resources Board. Of course, they exist to help manage resources statewide, and they're made up of citizens that are appointed by the governor. They can put their own proposals in. The Conservation Congress delegates and their committees can put proposals in, and then citizens can, like you mentioned. So you or anybody else could come to the Conservation Congress. There's a form, you can get it on the DNR website, you fill it out, say this is the problem I'm hoping to solve, this is what I'd like to see for a solution. You post it on the wall, everybody can read it, and then at the end of the night they vote on that resolution and say, hey, do we like this idea, do we not? And if we do, then it advances forward, and it starts a process where the Conservation Congress will look at it, the DNR will look at it, it'll come around for a vote again, and if people like it, it's something that could become law.
Actually, that process has actually speeded up dramatically from what it was a few years back, though. And now it used to be like once somebody did something, it was 6-7 years before it got done, it seemed like.
Well, I don't know that it was ever 6 or 7 years, but
Long time.
It's a multi-year process,
right?
Because we only have the spring hearings once a year, so that's our only chance. So if something starts at the local level and we have to bring it back to people, we have to wait at least a year before we can bring it back to them again. And then with the spring hearings happening in April, even if something is accepted then, the legislature doesn't have time to sign it into law before fishing season. So we're typically starting that for the fishing season that would follow the year that it's kind of accepted through the Conservation Congress. So there's a lot of people that take a look at it. It's just like changing any other law. I mean, this goes all the way. Your panfish regulation would wind up on the governor's desk,
right?
Which is kind of crazy to think about, but it is, I think, encouraging for folks to see. There's a lot of checks and balances here. This is certainly not the DNR doing whatever they want. We answer to the people, we answer to the legislature, we answer to the governor's office, the Natural Resources Board. If we put out a wonky proposal that shouldn't pass, it has to pass all those different steps, and typically that won't happen. So only good proposals make it all the way through that.
Well, there's a few other things that might be of interest to people on there.
Yeah, I mean, really, this year we're talking about some local stuff, and of course there's local stuff in our county and other counties, and then we're talking about the bass stuff, and those are kind of the two big ones on the fishing side. There are things that guides would be interested in. There's questions about, guiding fee increases. There's questions about whether guides should have to have documentation of CPR and first aid training and things like that. There's really a pretty wide range of topics this year. So I'd encourage people to check out the booklet online. You can go to the DNR website, search Conservation Congress, and you'll be able to find the booklet, read it ahead of time, have some time to think about things, do your own research if you need to, and then come out to the hearings and make your voice heard on those things.
I know I was looking at that guide thing. Of course, that's going to be of interest to me. And
Yeah.
The way it's worded in there, the general public may take it that the guides are using and making a ton of money off the resource. And I don't know many guides out there that make a whole lot of money. We do it because we love to do it, And, and the other thing is most of the guides, a lot of the guides have done more to promote the sport of fishing and to promote conservation and catch and release than, if we push the guides out, that would not be good for our resource, I don't think.
Yeah, and I just want to note that, that wasn't a question that was written by the DNR. That one came from the Conservation Congress, and you'll have to go into the booklet and read a little bit about, the background of why they're proposing that, and people will have, good points like you just brought up that'll be part of the discussion. And that's kind of, how we do this, is people come, and I'm sure you'll make a comment at our hearings locally, and people across the state will, and there'll be good discussion about kind of the pros and cons of each of these, and then we take all that feedback under advisement as we decide which things are going to get moved on and which ones are going to get dropped.
Well, I figured out where they're coming from. I found out talking to people, my senator for one, and they came from a couple of younger guides, and they kind of look at, if we raise the prices and raise the criteria, we'll get rid of a lot of these part-timers and these old-time guides. And you got to remember, a lot of the guides that worked all of their life didn't make a huge income, and they get 75 years old, they want to guide half a dozen days, 12 days out of the year because they love doing it. to take another bunch of money out of their pocket's not fair. If they're going to do that, I told the senator, I said, you ought to have a senior rate on it. Anybody that's been a guide for a number of years, you ought to have a reduced rate for them, because this is, you know, to penalize the senior citizen, the senior guide because of this is not a fair thing either.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the people who are putting it together, I don't, you know, I'll have to do a little more research.
It's an interesting thing. Anyhow, it's something people, in going to these meetings, people need to be aware of what's going on. They need to do some research, some background research, because I've always said this, that when you go to the meeting like that, you don't want to go and say, I want only walleyes, because that's all I care about. You know, we don't look at the health of the resource, what's the best for the lake, what we should do. We want to kind of take the time to look at that stuff rather than what I want and nobody else.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if we can get people thinking about kind of the greater good, that's excellent. But, you know, everybody is certainly entitled to their own personal preferences and opinions, and we want to capture as many of those as we can across the state, so we're getting a good sample. You know, the analogy I'll use sometimes is, if I go out to a lake and I'm doing a shocking survey and I stop after catching 5 bluegill, do I really know what that population looks like? No, I need to see a few hundred before I know what the average size and the biggest ones out there and things like that. And it's no different with gauging public opinion. We want to have a big sample size so that we know we're not just hearing from, you know, extremes on one end or the other. So that's the goal, is get a lot of people, get them involved.
And again, when is that meeting and where?
April 9th, Winter High School, 7 p.m.
And you ought to be there, folks.
And you ought to be there. And there's a meeting in every county throughout the state. So if you don't live in Sawyer County, you know, go on the DNR website, look up Conservation Congress. You can find the meeting in your county, and everybody will be voting on the same questions at the same time on the same night. It's kind of neat.
Interesting topic. I want to thank you for coming on here, Max.
You bet. Thanks for having me.